All right, several of you have been asking me about registering a domain, registering your hosting, and we're going to talk about that now. I'm also going to talk a little bit about online security. The I always use this analogy for domains and website hosting. Think of it as a house and an address. So if you own a house, if you live on campus, whatever, you have an address that points to your location. That is a domain. Um, and for hosting, we'll talk about that in just a second. But your domain is the actual address for a specific website. When you register that address, when you register that domain, you're securing the rights to that address. That doesn't mean you're securing the files. You're actually securing the domain address itself. It's yours. You own it. As long as you paid for it, it's yours until you either decide not to renew it, or you don't pay for it, or you transfer it to another person, individual, or company. Um, your website hosting and your domain registration, they are often in the same location, but that's not required. You don't have to go to GoDaddy and register your domain and sign up for their hosting. You could go to GoDaddy and just register your domain and then go to another company to build your website, and then they host your site and they tell GoDaddy to point your domain to their hosting servers. So unlike your home address, a domain registration can be anywhere that provides the ability to link to your website's hosting account. Most domain registrars, that's the actual company that registers your domain, that are out there are actually using one of about 10 recognized domain registrars. Let me explain. So if I go to, I believe NameSilo might be a reseller. So if I go to namesilo.com and I go to register my new domain, which is www.awesome.com, that's actually a subdomain and a domain. I'll get that in a minute. So when I register that with the company namesilo.com, they are actually a reseller. And so they're actually using a larger registrar service to register your domain for you. Our company, we do domain registration through Moduet. You can go to moduet.com, register your new domain. However, we are not a registrar ourselves. There's too much involved in that. There's too much potential for loss of information, lack of service, your domain not routing correctly, and different things like that. So we are what would be considered a reseller, but that doesn't, negate our ability to register your domain and actually monitor and maintain it. We use a company called Enom, ENOM, to register all of our clients' domains, and we actually have a contract with them so that we can lower our rates. You can go to Enom right now and register your domain. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff out there, but if you go to Enom right now and register your domain, it's actually more than if you go through a reseller like my company, because we've negotiated lower rates to register those domains. So the domain is the address of your website. It does not mean where your website is hosted. It's pointing to where your website is hosted. There's a difference between domain, subdomain, and URL. That first example up top, moduet.com, that's the domain of our company. That's what's registered. That's our domain. www.moduet.com shows the domain with a subdomain. The subdomain is the www before it. This is commonly used to point website traffic to the same location. It used to be this is like 15, 20 years ago, you had to secure that www.moduet.com because it was just common practice that you had to have it on there. Today, it's interchangeable. There's actually setups done and studies shown where people will monitor their traffic to modoet.com. They'll monitor their traffic to www.com, www.modoet.com, and they'll do case studies based off of that kind of traffic. 90, I'm going to take a leap of faith here, but I'm going to say 99% of all websites today, modoet.com and www.whateverdomain.com, are interchangeable. They go to the same location. Now, you could have app dot yourdomainname.com, and that points specifically to your mobile app. That's very common. Or you could have database dot whatever your location is .com point specifically to a database or a CRM. That's where subdomains come into play. It allows you to have different levels of your domain. The nice thing about that is you could have one company hosting your website, modoet.com, hosting in one location, but then you have a subdomain, let's say it's manage.modoet.com, that's actually hosted someplace else. So it gives you the ability to point your domain in multiple directions using a subdomain. That third link there, https://modoet.com/about, that's taking your domain and putting it into a full URL. So when someone asks for the URL, that's a URL. That's more than just your domain. That's pointing to a specific location within a route, or in this case, to a website. So what is website hosting? Well, if your domain is your address, website hosting is your house. That's where everything lives. So your domain points to the location of all your files. Now, like I said before, sometimes this is in the same location, meaning I register at GoDaddy.com, but I'm also hosting my files at GoDaddy.com. That could very well be the case. In our company, we use Enum to register all our domains, and then we have our own data center for all of our hosting. So it's two different locations, and we're able to point our domains to our hosting environment. The hosting is your physical location where all the website files for a specific website are located. A lot goes into hosting. There's security, there's infrastructure, there's different price structures, there's shared hosting, there's dedicated hosting. I'm not going to go into those specifics. I just want you to understand that website hosting itself has several components that make up a happy hosting location. What we're going to cover is servers, bandwidth, disk space, memory, and more importantly, or most importantly, security. Servers. This is your website's walls, structure, foundation within the hosting environment or data center. Every data center has a series of servers. These servers could be stretched out between multiple rooms to multiple locations around the entire globe. That's what we call the cloud. So when someone says they're hosted in the cloud, that is a marketing term to just say, hey, my company has access to multiple servers and they can switch my files from one server to another whenever they want to. That's all that means. It's the physical location within your hosting environment. Like I said, it could be anywhere. It could be in your neighbor's basement. True story, we had a client come to us to transfer their hosting account. We contacted their hosting company, who happened to be some dude who lived in his parents' basement and had a server of his own in the basement hosting clients' websites on that. Not only is that extremely stupid, ill-managed, poor business skills, and a huge security violation, it was just kind of dumb, not just on the dude's part, but the organization's part, because they didn't check this out. They didn't vet the company. You do got to hand it to this guy who went out on his own, bought his own server, set it up in his parents' basement, and was selling hosting space. I mean, I guess he wasn't all that stupid. He had a little business going there. So you have servers, then you have bandwidth. Bandwidth comes up in every single conversation that we have with clients about transferring their hosting or setting up new hosting for them. Essentially, bandwidth is the information that is transferred through your server. So every time you load a file, every time you go to a website, every time you load a page, every time a video renders on your page, and sometimes you'll go to a website and you'll see sometimes the text will load, but the images don't load right away, or sometimes everything loads, but it doesn't look like it's styled, and then all of a sudden the CSS loads and everything looks great. That's using bandwidth to pull that information and then display it for an individual. This used to be a huge concern, like so much that even today, hosting companies use it as a selling term. But a hosting provider today will give you a solid bandwidth because the way things are set up nowadays, bandwidth is manageable. You can compress files, you can compress traffic, you can do what's called caching, which means you save versions of your page load or site so that when people come back frequently, they're not constantly pulling bandwidth to load certain things. Hosting provider may put limits on your bandwidth in order to be fair to its clients. This means that you might be in a shared hosting space, which means they put you in servers that are shared among multiple environments. So your website could be hosted with, your next door neighbor's website, who could be hosted with the company down the street, who could be hosted with a college student. So that's called a shared environment, and they're going to put limits on your bandwidth because bandwidth is going through those servers for everyone. And so they just build common structures or common limitations that makes the space happy for everybody. Do not be scared about limiting bandwidth. The bandwidth is insane, what you can measure. So do not be worried about when someone comes to you and say, hey, they're going to limit my bandwidth. Hosting packages are designed for optimum experiences. If they're not, you will quickly find out just by visually looking at their sales tactics, or once you get into that hosting environment, you might see this does not seem as good as it gets. Jump out. Most hosting packages, they'll give you a clause so you can jump out. If you know within the first day or two something doesn't seem right, that goes way beyond bandwidth. You'll see it in security, you'll see it in customer support. But bandwidth itself, it's very, very easy to manage from a data center standpoint, so it's not a concern to the end consumer. Then you have disk space. Disk space used to be a huge issue, just like bandwidth. But as technology changes, disk space just keeps getting more and more accessible. Files just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Today, we only really see two things on a common basis. Now, it varies between clients, but the majority of clients that we see today that have issues with disk space, meaning the actual, storage space on their environment, is images and videos. Sorry, images, videos, and audio files take up the most space. And today, images are starting to fall off because the compression that you can do with images now, even while they're on the server, so you don't have to compress them before you upload them. WordPress is great for this. When you upload an image to WordPress, the first thing it does is it compresses and optimizes that image. Then, even after the fact, you can go back and optimize and compress it even more. So images aren't even the issue, but videos and audio files we still see to be a common issue that just eats up a lot of space. And thankfully, there are hosting platforms out there like YouTube and SoundCloud that will host your files, but also increase visibility. We tell this to clients, if they have videos that they want to host on their website, we encourage them to put them on YouTube because it's a marketing platform. We look at it like social media, and if you create a channel and you create growth through YouTube, you're bringing that growth to your website and vice versa. Same with audio files. A lot of people are using SoundCloud and as well as other hosting platforms now for podcasts and audio because it can be managed well. The cost is extremely affordable, sometimes free, and you don't have to worry about it eating up space on your website. Um, so again, a good hosting environment will provide enough disk space for your website to grow. For example, they will let you scale. So you may come in with 5 GB of uh, web space, which sounds like not a lot of storage, but believe it or not, the majority of our clients use that. But then you get into it and you're doing a lot of content, and your site gets pretty big and you need to bump up. Then they bump you into a bigger tier or a bigger disk space. They open up room for you. Then we have memory. Memory is a term assigned to how well information can be provided. Everyone's computer has disk space, has storage. Everyone's computer has memory. The same thing with servers and website hosting. You have a certain amount of memory that you have access to. This is still seen as a sales model where they will give you so much memory. However, we are starting to see competitors not even advertise memory anymore because of how they can manage the hosting environment. And that's something that we do, but we still advertise memory to clients. Um, you can tell right away if a website has poor memory or is poorly managed because it takes a long time to load. More importantly, if a website spikes in traffic and they start seeing a loss in functionality or load times, then their memory is not being accessed properly. And we actually have tools in place that will uh, increase and decrease that for clients as needed, unless they just go, an insane amount of traffic. Let's say, some local mom and pop shop, all of a sudden they get on, I don't know, what is that, drive-in dives and bars or whatever that show is. And then all of a sudden, like, people are going to their website and checking things out. Well, we don't know that they're going to be on that show, and they're in our basic package. And then all of a sudden, they go from getting maybe 10 website visits a day to 10,000 website visits within an hour. There's going to be issues, but if they have notified us, we could have made arrangements so that their memory would have buffered enough to allow stuff like that to happen. But also, that aside, there are tools in place like caching and optimization through WordPress that controls bandwidth and memory usage, so you're making the most out of your hosting plan. Website security. Like I said, probably of everything that we're going to talk about in this lecture, this is going to be the most important. Although malicious activity will always be around, a good host will ensure that it is up to date with the latest security features to help protect your server and information. Successful websites and website owners understand the basics of website security and SSL. Google blacklists over 50,000 websites each week because of security issues. And that's not just because they're being malicious, that's because something weird is going on with their website. And so that website is blacklisted, whether they're doing it or not. Organizations like Google, but more importantly, like Let's Encrypt or let'sencrypt.org, they're leading an effort to increase awareness and make website security a standard for anyone who owns or accesses a website. We use Let's Encrypt. It's the first layer of security that we put on every single website. We do not charge it to any of our clients because we know if our clients are secure, we're secure. So what is SSL? You might have heard of this. You might hear it thrown around. You may already know what secure or SSL is. SSL is a layer of security that you can put on any hosting environment. It stands for Secure Sockets Layer. You don't need to know the specifics of that. What you do need to know is it is a best practice for any website security, as it encrypts information between the server that hosts the website files and an individual's internet browser. The example in the picture below shows a screenshot of a Chrome browser. It's got a website URL, and there's two key features that we need to look at to see if a website is secured using SSL. For Chrome specifically, you're going to see a green lock showing the lock secured. If this was not a secured website, that lock would not be there. You'd have a warning. To the left of that lock, you can actually click on that and get information about the SSL certificate that's installed on this website. To the right, we see the URL, which starts with HTTPS. When that S is to the right of that P, we know that traffic is being forced through that secure layer. Those simple identifications can save you, your grandmother, your mom, a business, anyone from being fraudulently stalked through your browser. If you go to a website and you do not see a secure lock and you do not see HTTPS, I would question what you do on that site. I wouldn't supply any information. I wouldn't give them your name, your email, nothing. Because if that site is not secure, or if that page is not secure, and there's any form of interactivity in that, if there's any form of activity between you and that website, you're making yourself vulnerable as well as the website owner vulnerable to malicious phishing, spam behavior. There's a lot. So we always, any website we host, we put that SSL secure license on that site. If we are dealing with other people who we do not host, other websites that we don't host, and they come to us and say that they're having issues, the first thing that we look at is this. Is it secure? Do we see the lock when we go to the page? Does it say HTTPS? If it doesn't, that's the first thing that we identify with the organization. There are additional things beyond SSL within hosting and security. There are advancements in hosting with firewalls and handling data so that user information and website data are protected. A reliable hosting company will provide all the information necessary to keep companies' information safe and their users safe. It used to be that hosting companies really didn't take this as important as they do today, meaning they would use security as a sales tactic. So they would get you in the door, you'd sign up for hosting, and then anything to secure your website was an add-on. Well, the problem is that that turned into lawsuits, that turned into unhappy customers, and that turned into just poor web management. And when companies like Google and Let's Encrypt and several other companies, WordPress, stepped up and said, "This is stupid. Like you can do just basic levels of security that are little to no financial impact to the hosting provider and will make the internet just safer." One of those being firewalls. On our hosting environment, we have a actual physical firewall that gets installed within our servers to block traffic. And what this does is we keep a catalog of known IP addresses that will send malicious behavior, or we can add IP addresses to that firewall to block traffic. We also do virtual firewalls within a WordPress environment. So there's two levels within that environment, on top of the fact that they have an SSL license. So then they have three levels of security, and they all get that just by signing up for hosting. Other hosting providers will charge you for each of those levels. And that's just poor hosting management, because you're just making them victim, or you're just opening the door for them to be victims of malicious behavior. In addition to that, we also encourage every single website owner to practice, to show best practices when handling sensitive data, such as personal information or financial information. no website should house this information unless it's set up to do so. We encourage all of our clients to use specific credit card processors when they handle credit card processing because we do not allow any of our clients to hold financial information on our servers. It has to be within a third party who their own purpose is to just house financial information. If something happens to one of our clients and they have financial information on their website and it becomes vulnerable and ultimately, obtained by a malicious party, unfortunately, that's on them. We can't. I may have said this earlier, but you cannot guarantee in this day and age that someone will get through or will not get through. But we do our best efforts to keep the handling of sensitive data to its minimum. At the most, our clients will keep first name, last name, address information on their website. Everything else goes to a third party. But for anyone who owns a website, website security should be a priority because that will keep you successful. I know I covered a lot. This is one of those where it's all about just information. So if you have specific questions, please reach out. I'll give you some more details. If you yourself are looking for reasonable hosting or you're wanting to know how to register a domain, let me know. I'm not going to force you to go through moduet.com. There are great hosting and domain services out there that I will point you to. Some of them even give discounts to students as well. One other thing, I didn't put this in the slides, but there is security at the domain level, and that's called a CDN. It's a content delivery network, and we encourage our clients to go through that. We do not provide a CDN, but there is a CDN out there called Cloudflare that will monitor traffic to your domain before it ever even gets to your hosting environment, and it will block traffic. It's similar to a firewall. They keep a huge database of malicious IP addresses, and the whole idea is nothing can happen to your server or your website if it's blocked before it ever goes to your domain. So yeah, if you have any questions, reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer.